Hey guys, you know what time it is? It's Unit 2 review time on the age of exploration and the scientific revolution. So here's a web organizer to help you prepare for the multiple choice. Okay. So I'm going to try my best to help you see, or at least hear, some of this graphic web organizer to help you with preparing for the exam. So let's first start off with exploration. What was the goal of Europeans during this age of exploration? Well, first off, they were trying to find, right here, quicker routes to Asia. And some of the explorers who were trying to do this were Magellan, who actually died in Asia and the Philippines when his crew, however, was the first to circumnavigate the globe, and also Columbus. Now, Columbus was trying to go to Asia, but we all know he didn't actually get there. He ended up in the Americas, which is in the Western Hemisphere. So now, Europeans, their influence began to spread to the Western Hemisphere. And when that happened, they also started conquering much of the Americas, almost all of the Americas. And primarily who did this were Spanish conquistadors and some Portuguese conquistadors. They were able to do this despite having much smaller numbers because they had better weapons, firearms. Another big reason is because they brought disease that the natives were not immune to. And this disease, smallpox, measles, influenza, they didn't just kill a few, they killed millions. Over 90% are some estimates died just from disease. So when these natives died, they were no longer able to be used as a source of labor for cash crops for the Europeans, which led to them importing slaves from Africa. And then the triangle trade emerges as the Africans are being used. The journey from slaves from Africa to the Americas, as we know, is called the Middle Passage. So, of course, there's tons of negative effects of this, which we discussed, but it also led to the blending of African cultures with Latin cultures, producing a very unique culture in much of the Americas. So another reason why exploration did this, why the triangle trade emerged, is because the leading economic theory at the time was mercantilism. And the idea behind mercantilism is that a nation's power was measured by its wealth. That says wealth back there. Okay, and to do this, you would compete for limited resources. There's only so much gold in the world, only so many of this in the world or of that of the world, and your goal was to acquire as much of it as possible. So they also then wanted to acquire as many colonies as possible because the colonies had much of these raw materials, but also they could be used for producing cash crops. Okay, now what country led the way in exploration? We learned how it really began by the Portuguese and the Spanish, and then was replaced by the English and Dutch and French to some extent. Well, let me move this here. Portugal led the way in exploration. And why did Portugal lead the way? Well, there's a few reasons. First, think of its location. It is located on the Atlantic Ocean, right? So it had good access there. And also, because it is close to North Africa, it had contact with other empires to get more access to inventions, to trade routes, and all those sorts of things. Now I just made a mess. All right, so it's good to know then that Europe did not rely just on their inventions. That an example of cultural diffusion is that they used inventions from other cultures, the compass, triangular sails, the astrolabe, all those sorts of things. So to get such tools for navigation, they wanted to be able to navigate even better. So this need for navigation, look at this. The need to improve navigation led to advancements in math and science, which leads to the scientific revolution. So let me move over here. The scientific revolution. See this? All right, so when we think of the scientific revolution, we think of some of the famous scientists. We learned a lot about Newton, right? Isaac Newton, laws of gravity, his book that really validated science, but also people like Francis Bacon, encouraging people to experiment. Galileo, who supported the ideas of Copernicus and was sort of in trouble from the church because of it. Descartes, who believed you should doubt everything until you could prove it, right? So what did these fellows do? They did things like experiment, and they observed in order to form their own conclusions. And they did something which you still do today in your science classes. They used scientific method to prove these things. A popular idea amongst these scientists at the time was deism. Right? Being a deist meant that they still believed in God, but they looked at it a little bit differently than how the church was teaching things at the time. They said God is like a clockmaker, and he put the gears together, and now the universe operates. And it operates by these universal laws, and it's our job as scientists to try to discover them. And finally, think of some causes and effects of the scientific revolution. Think of what happened before it. Think of the Protestant Reformation. It was actually happening simultaneously, right? Martin Luther actually didn't like some of the works by some of these scientists. They were all happening at the same time. But the idea of questioning authority, like the Protestant reformers did, the encouragement to independent thinking as people interpreted the Bible for their own, also carried over into the science world for people to think for themselves, draw their own conclusions, question assumptions previously made. Why? If the Earth was not the center of the universe, what else could we be wrong about? And this whole philosophy that you can use science to explain things led to the Enlightenment, which we'll be learning about next. Taking the scientific method, experimenting and observing to find laws about other parts of the world. Government, right? Society. Other areas you could try to apply these laws to. Now that you've seen this video, don't stop. You need to study much more. What else? Well, first I would check the barn on our website. Why, you ask? Because there you'll find our study guide and also PowerPoints. Look under the two folders, Colonization, Global Age, and Scientific Revolution. Look over your homeworks. Look in notebooks for notes I gave you. Many of you took pictures of our giant post-it note reviews. Check for the website for a review session. And make sure you focus on the Columbian Exchange. And good luck. Good luck, good luck.